Yesterday we took a look at the Onion article, the magnasols, and you all got new shoe inserts yesterday, and
Oh my gosh, my
did you
life
bring
is
up Joe Frankel's in physics?
No.
I don't know.
And how did that go?
Well, Mr. Topping
He's not here today, so
well,
that could be
he was
bad.
like, well, the net migration would be 0, but then they started talking about Joe Frankel's and it's like, what?
You can make up whatever you
He was
want.
like, everything has a
Yeah, this is
frequency
math.
around the world, and that frequency.
I just made sure to convert my pain nuclei to pleasing comfortrons this morning. I was like stretching out. I felt better. Thankfully, I didn't twist my ankle. But ankle braces have helped with that. So yesterday we looked at the Onion. Today, we'll go over this stuff on the board first. But today we're going to take a look at the Coca-Cola one that is on the back. So the 1998, which is terrifying that you were not alive at the time that most people were taking this. Yeah, none of you would have been alive. I guess at that point. That's sad. You couldn't have been at my high school graduation. Anyone interested? Third grade orchestra concert is tonight. Should you want to see the dear Adeline perform, or you have earplugs that I can borrow. She's got that.
Once you see everyone start clapping.
Nana's not feeling well, and she came out to go on the trip. So maybe I'll stay home and help her.
Not feeling.
No, but we'll take a look at that here in a moment. Tomorrow, not today, Jack. Tomorrow, Siddhartha, Chapter 1, or not Chapter 1, Part 1 reading check quiz. So remember, your literary term quiz, that is for Thursday. You're used to that being Wednesday, but last one's going to be on Thursday. Vernacular's the last word you have to be worried about for the literary term quiz. So those writing movements that are at the end, transcendentalism and things like that, those areas you don't have to worry about. But there definitely will be, mentioned to you yesterday, there will be old terms on there because you only have like 8 or 9 new words for Thursday. Tomorrow, it's only on Part 1 reading check quiz. You got 3 more grades for the semester, 1 quiz grade, 1 participation grade, and then your essay, of course, that you submitted for independent reading. You're looking at 8-point quiz, 4 question. Short answer kind of quiz similar to what was Cuckoo's Nest. So no, there aren't any boxer short questions that might be surprising to Kaylee or anybody else. But you're not going to have to answer things like how many miles does he walk from here to there, or paces, or direct quotes that it says to somebody. So I think as long as you've read Part 1, fairly closely, it should be okay. And then remember, it's Thursday of next week, so you have 8 days to finish up the whole entire text. But we'll take a look at Part 1 tomorrow. Certainly go into Thursday with that as well, and then we should be in good shape. If you do have an independent reading book, like Emily and I know Nicole, you have yours, you can have those out, and I'll come around and collect farewell to arms that we have. Any questions about any of those things? Oh, I guess we'll take that one. Anyone still have the grapes of wrath at home?
I do. I haven't returned a single book.
I'm like, I don't know.
It looks impressive on a bookshelf, when it's all said and done. What did you say? Oh, you still have it?
I think it's probably check.
I'll have to look into it. I'm not worried about you reading the passage yet, but read the prompt to yourself, and then we're going to go, what's different about this one? So again, yesterday you had the Onion. Today we're taking a look at Coca-Cola. So just read the prompt, nothing else, and then look up. Publishing company. Not a teeny tiny publishing company, but not one of the big boys like Random House would be, or Penguin Books. Immediate reaction.
Not DRP rhetorical.
You're kind of not wrong though. Regardless of the answer that you take, the classification of it would be rhetorical analysis, since you do see. I'll highlight here. Since you do see the phrase analyzing the rhetorical strategies, but at the same point, where is there a little bit of a DRQ element to it? Which letter offers the more persuasive case, which also then means how many letters are you dealing with? 2. So even though it is one large passage, in theory from an AP exam standpoint, what does make it very different from any other rhetorical analysis that you have ever seen? There are 2 passages. And not showing you this one because it's the only time that has happened. It is not common. But it wouldn't be fair to say this is an anomaly that you're not going to have to deal with. If you were to place bets, would probably go, yeah, most likely Matt's going to have one passage to deal with. Very likely to be more of a speech, although letters are also very common on here as well. But I want to say it was 2008 or 2009, I think was the last time they did a double passage. There was another double passage around maybe 2001, this one in 98. And I think when I took the AP exam in 97, way before you were born, that one was a double passage as well. So chances are you'll get a single passage, but certainly the fact that you have a double passage is something that you want to be aware of. And one of the reasons of showing this to you, so that if it does happen, you don't go, oh my goodness, never saw that before. Good, bad, in the middle. You haven't read the letters yet, or most of you probably haven't. What would be fears about having a double passage? Because the line numbers are pretty much the same as any other rhetorical analysis that you'd be dealing with. Are there any fears about having a double passage? Well, fear nothing. Embrace all. Good for you. Carol?
It lets you to analyze each letter and then compare them, so it's kind of like, it sounds like it's a lecture.
Yeah, you would think at the very least that you're probably looking at 3 steps. One step, analyze rhetorical strategies for that letter. Second step, analyze rhetorical strategies for that letter, and then decide which one is going to be more persuasive. So chances are, most folks would probably try to do 1 body paragraph, 2nd body paragraph, 3rd body paragraph. Some of us, and this is not a complaint at all, some of us don't write 3 body paragraphs on TWA. Some of us are more comfortable going 2, lengthier paragraphs. So you might have to kind of combine which one is more persuasive with the analysis part. Generally, if you're going to be looking at a TWA, Cuckoo's Nest rhetorical devices. Jack, how many devices did you do? You remember?
3.
You did 3. Abby, you remember how many devices you did for Cuckoo's Nest? 2. I mean, most folks are going to do 2 or 3. If you did 2 or 3 for each letter, now you're up to a grand total of 4, 6. It would be nice if both letters did what with their devices? Use the same ones. The chances of that happening are probably, again, we haven't read them, but are probably fairly slim. So I think early on, some folks might be feeling a little uncomfortable or potentially overwhelmed. You don't want to have a thesis SPA statement of like 6 different rhetorical devices and then going into the argument, and this one is more persuasive than the other. So I think initially there could be a little bit of concern just about the amount of things that you have to tackle. But Matt's not worried. Any other concerns? I would think the content would be the most concerning at this point. Any others? Okay. So let's take a look at the letters. So who are our 2 executives? 1 person from Coca-Cola, 1 person from Grove Press. Of the 2 companies, I think everyone has heard of Grove Press, yes. Very famous. Actually, it is a pretty well-known publishing. But Coca-Cola is certainly going to be the big company compared to what would be going on in Grove Press. Notice the year we're looking in March 1970, so this is certainly going back a little bit. You thought 98 was in the past. 1970, it's even before I was born. My oldest brother was born. Today is Sadie's birthday. I wish her a happy birthday. She's 6. What?
It wasn't either.
Yeah, she's beyond that point now.
How old is she?
6.
That's the age.
I left this morning, and like I go in to check, make sure they didn't fall out of bed and they're covered and all that kind of stuff, because they do fall, quite a bit. Right back up. Covered her back up with her sheets and like her eyes kind of open. I said, "Happy birthday." Her life is now over. Iowa testing today. Dear Mr. Seaver, several people have called to our attention your advertisement for Diary of a Harlem School Teacher by Jim Haskins, which appears in the New York Times, March 3rd, 1970. The theme of the ad is, "This book is like a weapon. It's the real thing." Being the old person that I am, I now know Coke's concern. Any of you have any idea what Coke's concern would be at this point, without having read ahead? Probably not. Okay. Since our company, now he's going to let you know, since our company has made use of "It's the Real Thing" to advertise Coca-Cola long prior to the publication of the book, we are writing to ask you to stop using this theme or slogan in connection with the book. So what's Coke's concern? You're stealing our slogan. 98, and I don't remember the year in which Coke would have switched again, but I'm pretty sure, in 98, the time that a person would have been writing this response, they would recognize "It's the Real Thing" as being Coke. They had it on their cans and all that kind of stuff, back when you could get a can of Coke or Pepsi for 35 cents from a machine, instead of the $1.25 or whatever it is now. Tell you what, they're just raking us. I'm actually going to get a Coke machine and put it like right here, I think. I would. No vitamin water in this place. We're going caffeine and sugar. We believe that you will agree that it is undesirable for our companies to make simultaneous use of "the real thing" in connection with our respective products. There will always be likelihood of confusion as to the source or sponsorship of the goods, and the use by such prominent companies would dilute the distinctiveness of the trade slogan and diminish its effectiveness and value as an advertising and merchandising tool. "It's the Real Thing" was first used in advertising for Coca-Cola over 27 years ago to refer to our product. We first used it in print advertising in 1942 and extended it to outdoor advertising, including painted walls, some of which are still displayed throughout the country. The line has appeared in advertising for Coca-Cola during succeeding years. For example, in 1954, we used, quote, "There's this about Coke, you can't beat the real thing" in national advertising. We resumed national use of "It's the Real Thing" in the summer of 1969, and it is our main thrust for 1970. Please excuse my writing so fully, but I wanted to explain why we feel it necessary to ask you and your associates to use another line to advertise Mr. Haskins' book. We appreciate your cooperation and your assurance that you will discontinue the use of "It's the Real Thing." Sincerely, Ira C. Perkins. So what's he doing? How does he go about setting up his argument? Again, I'm not worried about parallel structure, this type of diction or whatnot, but how does he go about establishing "this is my argument" and trying to support it, whether, language, evidence, things like that? What are some things that?
First, he quotes the protest, to say this is a valid argument, and then he explains.
So like the ad itself from the New York Times early on? Okay. So here's the problem that I have. You're using "It's the Real Thing" and then backing it up with their reference to it. Okay?
And then he explains like the article in the third paragraph, and then he explains, I guess like the history behind what needs to be closed out, and he's kind of like,
Yeah. I mean, but, in its simplest terms, we had it first, and then we used it again and again and again. So it's ours, not yours, Jack. Leave us alone. And I would, yeah, agree. In the third body paragraph, pretty much goes into the main concern. What are they most worried about? What's Coke's concern about this? Besides the "it's our phrase, you took it," what would be like repercussions that they might be worried about?
Like the two things being associated, like they're the same thing.
Okay, so there will always be likelihood of confusion as to the source or sponsorship of the goods used by such prominent companies, which is a little bit of a compliment. You know, you're not some little mom and pop publisher that no one's heard about. You're a prominent company. We don't want any confusion to take place. And yeah, uses the phrase what dilutes the distinctiveness. I can't see it now. Where did it go? There we go, right underneath. Would dilute the distinctiveness of the trade slogan, diminish its effectiveness and value. And if you're talking about a company where it's going to diminish the effectiveness and the value, they really mean we might lose money, because that's what we're certainly going to be most worried about. Anything else that you see so far as the way that he goes about setting up his argument? Got dates. This is the ad. Got a problem with anything else stylistically wise that's going on. It's a pretty cut and dry, no frill letter. Stop using our phrase, please. Anything about the tone toward the bottom? Ben?
You just can't presume that they're gonna stop using it because he sent a letter.
Thank you we appreciate your cooperation and your assurance that you will discontinue the use of the real thing. We're Coke. Listen to us. Doesn't say we'll sue or anything like that, but yeah, it is certainly rather presumptuous. Of course you're going to do what we're telling you to do, because we're Coca-Cola. We're the big boys. You're the little peons. We can squash you. Effective letter, terrible letter, what you would just kind of expect letter.
It's alright.
What would you say would be the strongest point about it? Not trying to turn it into like Nobel Prize winning piece of literature here by any means.
It doesn't really have any like highlights. It's just I think they get their message across. Like, if they put like have a Coke in a song, then that would make it way better. But other than that, I'd say it's effective. But,
Okay. Any places where you would go, this might be the strength of the argument? Again, it doesn't mean you're putting gold star all over the place.
Just like backing up where they all have the dates and said, okay, well, we did this at this time.
Okay.
This slogan.
So like this area?
Yeah.
So there's some credence, some merit to the argument at that point. Jack, are you going the same place?
Yeah.
Okay. If you were, now I'm trying to now shift it towards that rhetorical strategy thing, would there be any dominant trait or traits that would best characterize Ira's letter with how he's trying to present his argument? Now this is probably the tricky parts.
You could say details of all the different dates and specifics.
Okay. I'm not saying we have to, use this for sure in thesis statement, but just kind of coming up with idea details with the dates. Would agree with that. Someone might not even necessarily be thinking of diction, imagery, details, but hey, he uses dates. Carol.
It's like his overall time is where I feel to them and kind of like do
Okay. Authoritative, confident. Shelby,
What?
did you have hand too? No. Okay. Ethos, pathos, logos. Logos.
That kind of goes with the details.
Okay. And he might not create it with his writing, but he would certainly. Well, Olivia, I don't want to take anything from you.
I was gonna say ethos as well because like him mentioning all of the dates, they're showing they're like an established company that's been around for a while, so that they should slow down.
And he certainly would argue that he has a heck of a lot of credibility here by the end. Thank you for listening to us. But yeah, you're right. The establishment of those dates gives him some validity, some credibility with what he's doing. Okay? Good. Letter sent out March 25th. You are getting a response on March 31st. Oh, that's my mom's birthday. Oh. Yeah. She would have turned 28. Uh-oh. That means she's going to be 75 this year. Probably supposed to do something for that one. It's tough being a responsible child.
Are you the oldest?
Nope.
Oh.
The youngest.
Youngest?
Yeah.
How many?
You were
She had-
definitely the three.
My mom had children in 3 separate decades. I mean, that's impressive. 60s, 70s, and 80s.
Wait, how many
kids is always like the most liked, I swear.
Because the youngest
Oh,
kid
yeah.
never gets like.
Because they don't care about us. They're not worried about us. They care about us, but like.
Are there last
Yeah,
shots?
everyone gets blamed on the older kid.
All the time.
Parenting.
I mean, again, Matt is like 2 of 12.
Yeah.
So all of the attention and the ensuing disappointment come from him and Kevin. But by the time little Column's running around these holes and like when I'm 70,
Yeah.
everyone will like him.
Congratulations.
Dear Mr. Herbert, thank you for your letter on March 25th, which has just reached me, doubtless because of the mail strike. And the U.S. Postal Service did go on strike in 1970s. So, but taking a week to get the letter is not too horrific. It's not like this 3 months later. We note with sympathy your feeling that you have a proprietary interest in the phrase, "it's the real thing." And I can fully understand that the public might be confused by our use of the expression and mistake a book by a Harlem school teacher for a 6-pack of Coca-Cola. They're laughing. I didn't get any chuckles out of the first period. They were dead this morning. They were still looking for that delay. Accordingly, we have instructed all our salesmen to notify bookstores that whenever a customer comes in and asks for a copy of Diary of a Harlem School Teacher, they should request the sales personnel to make sure that the customer wants is the book rather than a Coke. This, we think, should protect your interest and in no way harm ours. To use a term from 2 years ago, snarky. When the older Clark boy used it, it was snarky Clarky. What? He sat open. Sorry, Jordan. We would certainly not want to dilute the distinctiveness of your trade slogan nor diminish its effectiveness as an advertising and merchandising tool. But it did not occur to us that since the slogan is so closely identified with your product, those who read our ad may well tend to go out and buy a Coke rather than our book. We have discussed this problem in an executive committee meeting and by a vote of 7-6 decided that even if this were the case, we would be happy to give Coke the residual benefit of our advertising. Problems not unsimilar to the ones that you raise in your letter have occurred to us in the past. You may recall that we published Games People Play. This is a real book, which became one of the biggest non-fiction bestsellers of all time and spawned conscious imitations. Games People Play, Games Psychiatrists Play, Games Ministers Play, etc. I am sure you will agree that this posed a far more direct and deadly threat to both the author and ourselves than our use of "it's the real thing." Further, Games People Play has become part of our language, and one sees it constantly in advertising, as a newspaper headline, etc. The same is true of another book which we published 6 or 7 years ago, $100 Misunderstanding. Given our strong sentiments concerning the First Amendment, we will defend to the death your right to use "it's the real thing" in any advertising you care to. We would hope you would do the same for us, especially when no one here in our advertising agency, I'm sorry to say, realize that you own the phrase. We were merely quoting in our ads Peter S. Prescott's review of Diary of a Harlem School Teacher in Look magazine, which begins, "Diary of a Harlem School Teacher is the real thing, a short, spare, honest book, which will, I suspect, be a read a generation hence as a classic. With all best wishes, sincerely yours, Richard C." Games People Play. So, what do we notice here? I mean, what Nicole said, sassy, pretty much right away. What phrases or places would you say the tone? You don't have to say like specific word if nothing comes to mind, but when does the sassiness kind of start to?
When he says, I don't like to get mistaken about pressings back in there.
Okay. Jordan, were you gonna go that same place?
I was gonna say that like the paragraph talks about like their past publications, so like imitates the paragraph and talks about like the history of their study.
Mm-hmm. So, in which you look at it, and certainly side by side, it's much easier to kind of compare and contrast what's going on. But really, like the same area, here is our history of our use of the slogan. Not history of our slogan, but here is our history of people using, our kind of title for their own books. And not only going, certainly that other people have done it, but I'm sure that you will agree that this posed a far more direct and deadly threat to both ourselves than our use of "it's the real thing." So there's that comparison of historical precedents, but hey, I think ours is a little bit more serious, what we had to deal with, than what you would have to deal with this one.
What stuck out to me is in 65, they just like copied what Coke said.
Yeah, which is part of the argument in the first place. Dilute the distinctiveness of your trade slogan or diminish its effectiveness. Could have put quotation marks, I guess, around it. Do you think he's purposely doing it? Which again, notice it's like right at the same place.
Definitely. Like, it's kind of mocking.
Okay. So since we stole "it's the real thing," we're also going to steal your kind of phrase that's going on there. What else? Carol?
When he talks about like we didn't even get the advertising time from like your product, we got it from the person who reviewed this book.
Okay. And so again, where Coke kind of goes, this is the history of our use of the phrase. It's not that we came up with it, it's that this already appeared. And really, in any way, if there's anyone that you should be upset with, it would be Peter S. Prescott and that review in Look magazine. And certainly, when you look on the back of most books, what do you have? The reviews, the headlines. So they're taking one of those reviews and one of those headlines and putting the ad that would go along.
It mentions like the First Amendment, which like is pretty big. It's saying that they have the law on their side.
You're right. I love the way that he, though, kind of uses it. Because if you were to say that they're going to use the First Amendment, how would you expect he would use it?
I say like we defend our our right to the First Amendment.
We have our freedoms, but how does he present it?
He says like, oh, you have your freedoms to use our line.
And yet, we will defend to the death your right to use this line. We are not going to stop you. Now, he does follow it up with, we hope you would do the same for us. But, again, that's kind of, I would agree in that mocking kind of tone. We're going to the end. We're going to the battlefield for you. You can use this phrase with your soft drink. And just to make sure there isn't any confusion, when the people buy the book or want to buy the book, what will the salespeople do? Are you sure you want to buy a book? Or do you want to buy a six-pack of Coca-Cola? And then the whole committee meeting thing, which I'm pretty sure at this point he's now making stuff up, which he has the right to do. What do they decide with that 7-6 vote? We would certainly not want to dilute the distinctiveness of your trade slogan nor diminish its effectiveness as an advertising and merchandising tool. But it did not occur to us that since the slogan is so closely identified with your product, those who read our ad may well tend to go out and buy a Coke rather than a book. So Jack sees the ad for the book and goes, I'm thirsty. Those who read our ad may go out and buy a Coke. We have discovered this problem in an executive committee, and vote 7-6 decided, even if this is the case, we would be happy to give Coke the residual benefit. We said the main concern that they probably had over here was money, how does he kind of twist that argument?
He's saying if the slogan reminds people of Coke, then they'll go on to buy it.
So if anything, you're benefiting from it. We accept that we might lose money to you because people will now become thirsty by seeing our ad. You're welcome. Now moving on to the next point. So down here at the bottom, we're going over details, logos, ethos, dates, authoritative tone, stuff like that. When it comes to this letter, if you were to come up again with general phrases, terms, devices, what's Mr. Seaver using? Add it in one way.
I think they're also using ethos and like their credibility with like look, people have copied us before, and like we know like the threats of it.
Okay. This isn't a new. We've been on the side that you think you're on, where we've been kind of damaged by it, or potentially could be damaged by it. Aiden, did you have?
I was gonna say in contrast to the authoritative tone, they have
Okay. And again, remember what we've been looking at the past 3 days: modest proposal, Catholic Politics modest proposal, onion. So there's definitely some satirical quality going with it. So sarcastic or mocking tone. I'm not saying that these are the only two options, but right now, if I'm writing the essay, I'm done. I know exactly what I'm going to do. Any ideas why? I mean, I got a lot of stuff to pull from it. I need to start writing. Yeah, I could mention, in my thesis statement, in my SPA, there it goes, that both writers really developed their argument around the use of ethos and tone. I'm not going to say authoritative tone and mocking or sarcastic tone. I'm going to save that for when I get into the body paragraphs. But by me picking those two devices, and certainly you could mention details, you could use something like past history, you could argue the First Amendment. If you were just looking at First Amendment, you could say that Seaver's making a what? Making an allusion. And you could argue with the dates, that he's referencing, alluding to previous ad campaigns. So it's not that these are the only two that are shared. But once I have two that I feel pretty good about, that I know both ones are using, I'm going to go with that for my thesis statement. Ethos and tone, convey the arguments that each writer is trying to get across. I'll probably use a separate sentence, kind of make a compound thesis, because what's the second part of the argument I have to identify? And that's where, Abigail's DRQ kind of starts to take shape. I got to decide which one. And it's not that there's a right or a wrong answer. I just have to explain why one is more persuasive than the other. Coke, Grove Press. Who's more persuasive? In your mind. Grove Press. I mean, and let's be honest, if you're kind of in the middle, what do we like? Humor. Something's funny. That's kind of like a defense mechanism that we'll kind of get ourselves attached to. I think more people will probably go with this one. But you certainly could argue that he has history on his side and could go with Coke. There's no problem with that whatsoever. The one thing you want to make sure you do is explain why the ethos is more convincing on one side, why the tone is more convincing on one side. If you think Coke is the more persuasive letter, what order would you do your paragraphs? Coke first or Grove? Why? And what if I'm worried about time, what can I also do in that Coke paragraph that'll work having it coming after Grove Press? I can reference Grove Press, but explain why the Coke one is more persuasive, more effective. It would be hard to reference Grove Press in my first body paragraph that's about Coke. This is more effective than what Grove Press did, but I didn't write about that one yet. But if you start with the one that you are not, I don't say not a fan of, but you don't find to be as effective, you can do your straightforward rhetorical analysis the way you normally would. Then that second one, you do the rhetorical analysis, but you can kind of add in comparison to what you already wrote about why this one is better. So I think you could still do this essay in 2 body paragraphs. You just have to make sure you plan. Majority of folks would probably start with Coke right off the bat because it's the first letter, but the structure might not match up with the rationale and thought process that they have. The big thing is, should you see 2 passages, don't get scared immediately. It's still the same process that we normally do. You just have to have a little bit more thought going into it early on, especially for that planning preparation stage. Tomorrow, Siddhartha will take a look at part 1. Questions that you have, certainly be ready to answer. Siddhartha's basically your age at the beginning of the book. So one of the things we might kind of start with is how relatable of a character is he? How can we relate or not relate? And kind of go from there. Books that you have, just keep at your desk out, get them here at the end.
That was pretty impressive.
He's like, Siddhartha will not know.
Yeah. Like especially when he's talking to like his dad and all that kind of stuff. We'll repeat.
Wait, what?
Yeah, he's like, bro, I can't have time, people. Get out of here.
Shelby is grounded. Shelby is not grounded. Shelby is going out tonight. Shelby will. Shelby will. That's the reading checklist. You can stand here the longest with their arms folded without like wavering and falling.
So I need to practice.